Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take a stack of dense sources and really try to extract the essential nuggets of knowledge for you.
Hey there.
Today, we are tearing into something that gives nearly every single person listening, I think, a low-grade, persistent form of anxiety.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the lifespan of the battery that's powering, well, everything essential in your life.
Everything. It truly is the universal curse of the modern age, isn't it? You spend a lot of money on a high-tech item, your smartphone, a laptop, maybe even an electric vehicle, and for the first year, it feels, unstoppable.
Absolutely. The battery lasts forever.
Yeah.
But then year 2 hits, year 3, and suddenly it barely makes it through the day. You get this pervasive feeling that everything is engineered not just to work, but to fail. And to fail predictably.
Exactly. Predictably and rapidly. We've all been conditioned to accept that this fast decline is just an inevitable part of owning anything with a battery. We just feel like they are fundamentally built with an expiration date stamped on them. But the source material we analyzed for you today suggests that a radical, and I mean a really fundamental shift in that engineering philosophy is happening right now, specifically in the automotive space.
Yeah, we're looking at this crucial pivot made by manufacturers, most notably Tesla, away from the high-energy, performance-focused batteries. That's the nickel-cobalt-manganese chemistry, or NCM.
Right.
And toward this incredibly durable, but often misunderstood, lithium iron phosphate battery, LFP for short.
And when this shift first started, you remember this, when Tesla began putting these iron batteries into their standard range cars, the market reaction was instantaneous, and it was highly critical.
Oh yeah, the internet went nuts.
The internet immediately screamed, cost cutting, they're just putting cheaper batteries in the mass market cars. And look, while LFP is certainly less expensive to make, our deep dive mission today is to understand if this was actually a much deeper, more radical engineering decision, one focused entirely on durability and longevity.
That's the core question we have to answer. Was this a simple cost cut, or was this a calculated, purposeful move to create a vehicle that fundamentally will not age the way its predecessors did?
To even get to the bottom of that, we have to start by defining what durability even means in this world.
Right, we need a scorecard.
Yeah.
And there's really only one number that genuinely matters when you're discussing the health and, the eventual death of a battery. And that number is cycle life.
Cycle life. Okay, we hear that term thrown around a lot, especially in tech reviews, but let's define it precisely. Why is this one metric the true scorecard for a battery's long-term value?
So cycle life is the true measure of a power source's robustness. Think of it as the total number of full charge-discharge cycles. So a full trip from 100% down to 0% and then back up again.
Okay, one round trip.
One full round trip. Cycle life is how many of those trips the battery can complete before its usable capacity drops below a really critical benchmark.
And that benchmark is 80%. That's the magic number.
Precisely. That 80% capacity threshold is the universally accepted retirement point for high-capacity batteries. It's the standard worldwide.
So once it drops below 80%, what happens? Why is that the line?
Below that point, the battery's performance degrades pretty significantly. It becomes less efficient, it starts to charge slower, and the energy output becomes, unreliable. You can't trust the meter anymore.
So to put it in real terms, if your brand new EV starts with, say, 300 miles of range, once it consistently struggles to deliver 240 miles, even when you charge it all the way up, it's effectively deemed retired, or at least, seriously degraded.
That's it. And cycle life is the counter. It tracks how many times you can make that trip before you hit that 80% loss mark. It dictates the predictable, the usable, and the economic lifespan of the whole device.
So if we want to know if a car is designed to last 5 years or 15 years,
you look at its cycle life, because the battery is the single most expensive and vital component in that whole vehicle.
Okay, so to really appreciate the durability of this new LFP chemistry, we have to establish a baseline. Let's look at the high-performance batteries we're all using every day. The standard NCM nickel, cobalt, manganese chemistry.
The ones prized for high range, fast acceleration.
Yeah.
All the flashy numbers.
Exactly. What is their typical expected cycle score?
The standard NCM batteries, the ones that are really engineered to pack the absolute maximum amount of energy into the smallest possible space, they typically deliver somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 full charge cycles.
1,000 to 1,500.
Yep. And that's before they dip under that critical 80% threshold.
Let's put that number into context for someone listening. So if you drive an EV that gets 300 miles per charge and you're driving, I don't know, 15,000 miles a
A
year.
pretty typical number.
Right. You're hitting a full cycle roughly once every week and a half. So what, about 65 cycles per year? At the high end of 1,500 cycles, you've got about 23 years of theoretical life. But that's going to be under perfect conditions.
That's the key phrase. Under perfect, gentle laboratory conditions. And conditions are never perfect.
Never.
These batteries are subject to extreme temperatures, hot and cold. They deal with aggressive fast charging speeds and just daily usage patterns that really push them hard. What that NCM score really means is that there is a predictable expiration date on that car's peak performance.
So after, what, 5 to 8 years?
5 to 8 years, depending on how you use it, you will start to feel that range anxiety creep back in as the degradation really starts to accelerate.
Okay, so we have a chemistry that starts really strong, offers incredible peak performance, but it's inherently designed for relatively early decay. So why? Why do these highly engineered, expensive batteries that start at 100% just inevitably wear out?
I mean, it's not just that you're using them, it's about specific physical mechanisms that are reacting to that usage. We can really summarize the deterioration into three main culprits, three persistent mechanics that are always working against the health of the battery cell.
And we have to understand these to see how LFP beats them.
Exactly. So first is crystal structure deformation. The fundamental architecture inside the cathode is physically twisting and breaking.
Wow, okay.
Second, there's mechanical stress, the constant physical stretching and squeezing that leads to fatigue. And the third, which is incredibly crucial and often misunderstood, is side reactions, specifically the irreversible growth of something called the SEI layer.
Okay, so crystal damage, mechanical stress, and internal gunk accumulation. Let's start with that last one. The side reactions and this SEI layer. The sources we looked at really point to this as a primary driver of irreversible capacity loss in these NCM batteries. What on earth is an SEI layer and why is it so damaging?
So the SEI layer is it's essentially an internal coating. It's a byproduct that forms naturally on the surface of the anode when the liquid electrolyte inside the battery reacts with the electrode material.
Sure, it just happens.
It just happens. And in a healthy brand new battery, a thin, stable SEI layer is actually a good thing. It acts like a protective skin, preventing more unwanted reactions from happening.
So it's a good thing initially, like a protective stab or something.
Exactly, a protective layer. But in NCM batteries, particularly when you charge them to high voltages, like up to 100%, or you subject them to high heat, that protective layer becomes unstable. It starts to grow thicker and thicker and thicker over time.
So it goes from being a protective skin
to a thickening, inefficient sludge or gunk. It just clogs up the works.
And what's the immediate consequence of this thickening sludge? What does it actually do to hurt the battery?
Two things happen.
Yeah.
And both are disastrous for capacity. First, the growth of the SEI layer is irreversible, and it actually consumes the active lithium ions in the process.
No.
Yes. Lithium is the energy carrier. It's the juice. Every time that SEI layer thickens, a small, precious amount of lithium is locked away permanently. It can never participate in charging or discharging again. It's just gone.
It's like pouring a little bit of concrete down a drain every single time you use it. You are permanently using up your working fluid.
Precisely. And the second problem is that this thick, sludgy layer acts as a physical barrier. It impedes the easy flow of the remaining lithium ions. They have to fight their way into and out of the electrodes.
So it's slowing everything down.
It's slowing everything down, which leads to increased internal resistance. This means the battery becomes slower to charge, and it loses more energy as heat, which, of course, further accelerates its own degradation. It's a vicious cycle.
This one mechanism alone basically guarantees a predictable accelerating capacity loss.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, that perfectly sets up the second point you mentioned. The physical failure. The one driven by mechanical stress, which we liken to a tearing sponge. Let's go back to this idea of volume change in the NCM cathode. What's the physical dance happening inside that cell?
Okay, so when you charge an NCM battery, the lithium ions, they have to enter the cathode structure. And to house this influx of ions, the cathode structure has to physically expand. It swells up, sometimes by a pretty significant percentage.
It gets bigger.
It gets bigger. And when you discharge the battery, the ions leave and the structure contracts. It shrinks back down. So this constant volumetric expansion and contraction is like the NCM battery is constantly breathing or flexing.
And it's stressing its internal architecture every time.
Every single time. Which is where our analogy comes in. We thought of the NCM cathode as being like a highly flexible but ultimately fragile engineered sponge.
Okay, a sponge, I get that.
You are constantly squeezing it tight and then letting it puff back out thousands and thousands of times. And even the most flexible high-tech material will eventually succumb to fatigue. This mechanical stress causes microscopic weaknesses to form.
So the constant physical stress, that mechanical stretching and squeezing, it creates microcracks within the particle structure over time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You get these tiny tears,
Mm.
especially around what they call the grain boundaries. And as these microcracks form, they isolate parts of the active material from the rest of the electrical network.
It's like ripping the contact point off a wire.
Perfect analogy. That piece of active material can no longer store or release energy. It's just dead weight. And just like the thickening SEI gunk, this microcracking leads to a permanent, irreversible loss of capacity.
And this cycle, the constant physical tearing coupled with the thickening of the internal gunk, this is why NCM batteries are inherently built to age and fail after their 1,500 cycles.
Yes, they are victims of their own aggressive design. It's the unavoidable trade-off you make to maximize range and power. It's what defines the usable life of the vehicle, and it's the benchmark that LFP durability is about to just completely shatter.
Okay, so if the NCM battery is the high-performance, fragile sponge that tears and clogs itself up over 1,500 cycles, we now have to transition to LFP, lithium iron phosphate. This is where the durability numbers jump into a totally different league. What kind of lifespan are we talking about here?
The durability leak is. It's massive, and it's why this shift is so significant for the future of owning an EV. Where NCM typically maxes out between, 1,000 to maybe 1,500 cycles, LFP chemistry has been rigorously demonstrated to maintain its capacity through an astonishing 3,000, 4,000, and sometimes even 6,000 full cycles.
Hold on, let's pause on that 6,000 number. If we go back to our calculation from before 65 cycles per year, for a typical daily driver, 6,000 cycles represents over 90 years of driving.
It's a theoretical number, but yes.
Even if you account for losses and inefficiencies and aggressive driving, we are talking about a lifespan that is 2 to 4 times longer than the vehicle's expected mechanical life. This isn't just a marginal gain. This is fundamentally changing the entire calculus of long-term ownership.
It entirely changes the concept of product longevity. The only reasonable conclusion you can draw is that the battery is now engineered to outlive the rest of the car.
Yeah.
This level of endurance is why LFP is used all the time in stationary energy storage.
Right.
The big grid batteries. Because those are expected to operate every single day for 15 or 20 years without fail. LFP is the very definition of a low degradation chemistry.
So how did they do it? How did they pull off this radical jump in lifespan? We know it has everything to do with the chemistry, specifically the phosphate part. What's the secret inside the structure?
The secret lies in the chemical bond that creates the scaffolding of the cathode. LFP uses the phosphate group, which is POO. When this group bonds with the iron, it forms an incredibly stable three-dimensional structure called an olivine structure.
Okay.
But the real hero is the bond between the phosphorus and the oxygen atoms, the PO bond. That is what provides this almost miraculous strength.
Strong in what way? If NCM was flexible and yielding, what is LFP?
Picture it like a fortress chemically cemented together. The PO bond is exceptionally strong and it's chemically inert. It acts like a high-strength molecular superglue that holds the entire crystal structure rigidly in place.
A molecular superglue, I like that.
And this high stability means that the LFP cathode structure is just intrinsically resistant to all the chemical and thermal pressures that plague NCM batteries.
So wait, we've solved the internal gunk problem, the SEI layer growth right there, haven't we?
Largely, yes. Because the LFP structure is so stable and so resistant to unwanted side reactions, it operates in a much safer chemical window. The growth of that irreversible lithium-consuming SEI layer is significantly suppressed compared to NCM.
Even at high temperatures or a full charge?
Even then. The structure simply doesn't break down and react with the electrolyte as easily. It's just too tough.
That's incredible. So that addresses the chemical failure. Now let's tackle the mechanical failure, the tearing sponge. How does this chemical toughness translate into eliminating that constant damaging mechanical stress from the volume change?
And this brings us back to our critical analogy. If NCM was the flexible tearing sponge, the LFP cathode is a rigid steel construction cage.
A completely fixed structure. It doesn't move.
Precisely. The LFP structure is so rigid, thanks to those superglue phosphate bonds, that when the lithium ions flow in during charging, The cage itself does not significantly expand or contract. The volume change is dramatically minimized,
Oh, minimize.
often less than 1%. Compare that to the potentially high single-digit percentage changes for NCM. It's a whole different world.
So the lithium ions are still moving in and out, they're still carrying the energy, but the structure they're moving into remains mostly static. That fundamentally removes the entire mechanism of physical fatigue.
Absolutely. The stress of the charging cycle is just. It's managed by the fixed nature of the material itself. There's virtually no constant stretching or squeezing of the structure.
And if the structure remains stable?
The risk of developing those internal microcracks, the main reason for active material loss in NCM, is virtually eliminated. The structure doesn't move, it doesn't deform, so you dramatically reduce mechanical fatigue over time.
This is the breakthrough. When you charge an LFP battery 1,000 times, you are stressing it far, far less than if you charged an NCM battery 1,000 times. You're just running ions in and out of a preset, robust channel, rather than forcing the entire material framework to physically expand and then collapse.
And that structural stability, that is the sole reason we see the 3,000 to 6,000 cycle life scores. Tesla made a choice. They accepted a slight reduction in initial energy density, which means LFP cars have slightly less range than their NCM counterparts.
But they gained an exponential increase in durability.
It is a purposeful engineering trade-off, sacrificing a little bit of P performance for engineered longevity.
Okay, this superior steel cage stability leads us directly to the most surprising and honestly counterintuitive discovery from all the sources. And it's the one that flies directly in the face of everything we've ever been taught about how to manage our batteries.
It really does. It challenges the golden rule that has governed basically every battery conversation since the lithium-ion cell was invented.
That rule, of course, is never charge to 100%. We are all told constantly that pushing a battery to full saturation creates excessive stress, it accelerates degradation, and it shortens its overall life.
And just to be clear, that advice is absolutely true for NCM batteries.
Right, for the fragile sponge, it's true.
Correct. For those NCM cells, operating at 100% is dangerous. It forces the cathode and anode into highly stressed states. The high voltage facilitates that dangerous excessive oxidation, think of it as accelerated corrosion, and it increases the risk of something called lithium plating. That is a fast track to cell death.
But here's the radical reversal. The official recommendation from manufacturers like Tesla for LFP-equipped vehicles is to regularly charge to 100%. This isn't just a suggestion, it's practically mandated maintenance. So why? Why are LFP batteries safe at full charge, and why is this 100% charge actually beneficial?
There are two separate, really powerful reasons. The first one, as you probably can, links right back to our steel cage discussion, chemical tolerance and stability.
So if NCM at 100% is stressed and corroding, why does LFP avoid that same fate?
Because LFP is so inherently stable, that fixed steel cage structure, operating it at high saturation levels, just doesn't expose the battery to the same high stress. The strong PO bonds hold the structure firm. And crucially, LFP operates at a slightly lower overall voltage than NCM, which keeps it out of the high potential damage zones where all that nasty metal dissolution and plating typically occur.
It's basically operating in a fundamentally safer chemical neighborhood.
That's a great way to put it.
So you're not pushing the chemical limits of the material when you fill the cage to the brim. You're simply using its full but still safe volume.
Precisely. It is chemically safe and robust at 100% state of charge. The risk of accelerated degradation from oxidation is largely removed.
Yeah.
But the second reason for the 100% recommendation is even more critical for your daily experience as an owner. It's about necessary calibration for the scorekeeper.
The scorekeeper being the battery management system, or BMS, the little computer that has to translate all this chemistry into miles of remaining range for the driver.
Right. And the BMS needs to know exactly how much energy is left. Now, in NCM batteries, this is relatively easy. The voltage curve is steep. A small drop in energy leads to a significant, easily measurable drop in voltage. The BMS can accurately track the remaining capacity just by watching the voltage fall.
But LFP behaves differently. This is where the famous flat voltage curve comes in, right?
Yes, the LFP voltage curve is notorious for being flat across a huge range of its capacity, especially in that middle section, from roughly 20% to 80% charge. The analogy we came up with is this. Trying to measure the energy in an LFP cell is like trying to measure the water level in a very, very wide, shallow swimming pool.
Okay, yeah, that would be tricky.
It's incredibly tricky because a massive difference in the volume of water only translates into a tiny, almost imperceptible change in the water level, or in this case, the voltage.
So if you're just glancing at the pool level, it's almost impossible to tell if it's 60% full or 70% or 80%. The change is just too subtle.
That's the problem the BMS faces. If the voltage signal is this unreliable in the middle, the BMS loses its anchor. It has to rely on another method called Coulomb counting, basically tracking energy flow in and out to estimate the charge.
And that's not perfect.
Not at all. The calculation starts to drift. Temperature fluctuations, slight differences between the thousands of cells, variations in charging speed, it all adds up. The BMS loses its calibration point. And if the system drifts and tells you you have 80 miles left when you actually only have 50.
That's a dangerous reliability issue for an owner. You could get stranded.
Absolutely. So the system gets internally confused over time. What's the only way to make it honest again?
You have to find a clear reference point.
You have to force the system to find an unambiguous reference point, a definitive 0 point for its measurement. And the LFP chemistry has very distinct, very clear voltage signals at the absolute top 100% and the absolute bottom 0%.
And since you don't want to be constantly running your car down to zero, the safest and most effective way to reset the whole system is to charge it all the way to the top.
Charging it to 100% essentially calibrates the system. It allows the BMS to re-zero its internal counter based on a known maximum voltage signal. This reset ensures that moving forward, your range estimates are reliable and accurate. It prevents that dangerous drift.
So if you avoid 100% charging for months, your car's range guesser just gets worse and worse.
It becomes increasingly inaccurate, yeah. It can reduce the usable range and lead to some really frustrating and, as we said, potentially dangerous misestimates.
So the key takeaway here is it's profound. It completely flips the script. For NCM, charging to 100% is a self-inflicted wound that stresses the material. For LFP, charging to 100% is a necessary, proactive maintenance task.
A task that improves long-term performance and accuracy by keeping the BMS calibrated. It's maintenance, not damage.
That reversal is the ultimate validation of LFP's robustness.
It is, and it offers the owner a psychological and practical freedom that NCM users just don't have. The freedom to plug in every night and set the charge limit to 100% without any guilt or complex strategy.
We've established that the LFP battery gives you 3,000 to 6,000 cycles, all thanks to its rigid, fixed steel cage structure. But what does this durability shift really mean for the person who actually owns the car? This seems to be where the concept of the electric vehicle shifts dramatically. It goes from being a high-tech appliance with a ticking battery clock to a sustainable, genuine, long-term asset.
The shift is entirely in the value proposition. When you buy an NCM-equipped vehicle, you're buying peak performance, you're buying maximum range. But you are also inheriting a known, predictable, and accelerating rate of degradation.
You know it's going to get worse.
You know it is. But when you buy an LFP vehicle, you're sacrificing a tiny bit of that peak performance for the long game. You are purchasing peace of mind. You're hedging against major future costs.
Let's quantify that. How does this durability translate into real-world financial and usability benefits for an owner? What makes the LFP vehicle a genuine long-term investment?
Okay, we can break it down into 4 critical investment advantages. The first and the most obvious one is less capacity loss over time. Because the internal structure resists those micro cracks and suppresses the gunk growth, the car stays remarkably close to its original range for years and years. Typical NCM cars might see 10, maybe 15% degradation within the first 5 years, especially under heavy use.
I've seen that.
But LFP is consistently cited in independent studies as losing far, far less, often slowing above 95% capacity after 5 years of daily real-world use.
Wow. That immediately means better usability. The car you bought is essentially the same car you're driving 5 years later, which is a rare thing in any consumer technology.
It really is. The second big advantage is lower change risk.
The big one.
The big one. When we talk about the total cost of EV ownership, the single most significant financial sword of Damocles hanging over every owner's head is the potential for an expensive battery pack replacement outside of the warranty period.
And these are not cheap.
Not at all. Depending on the size of the vehicle, a major battery replacement can cost anywhere from, say, $10,000 to $20,000. It can be more than the car is worth at that point.
That's a huge potential cost that just looms over you.
And LFP fundamentally hedges against that risk. Given that the typical car ownership period is around 7 or 8 years, and the LFP battery is rated for 3,000 to 6,000 cycles, the probability that the original owner will ever face that expensive replacement risk drops to almost zero. The component is simply designed to outlast the practical, functional life of the vehicle's chassis and all the other parts.
Okay, the third advantage. This one relates directly to the resale market, which affects the overall cost of ownership for everybody. And that's slower depreciation.
This is a huge factor. The secondary, the used car market, has historically discounted EVs heavily based on the unknown health of the battery.
Because that's the big question mark.
It's the multi-thousand-dollar question mark. So if a used car buyer is looking at two vehicles, one with a fragile NCM chemistry and an uncertain history, and one with a robust LFP chemistry known for minimal aging, the second-hand value of that LFP car is going to hold much better. The market recognizes that embedded durability.
It removes the buyer's anxiety about inheriting a degraded, ticking time bomb. The car ages better, so its monetary value just holds up better.
Exactly. LFP becomes a tangible selling point, not just a technical spec on a sheet. And that leads to the final advantage, the one that touches your daily life and just removes that nagging battery anxiety. Daily charging freedom.
The psychological win.
It's the psychological benefit of simplicity. The NCM owner has to always be strategic. You're calculating charge limits, worrying about extreme temperatures, planning your fast charging sessions carefully. The LFP owner operates with a set-it-and-forget-it mentality.
Just plug it in.
You can plug in and charge to 100% every single night without guilt, knowing that you are maintaining the system's accuracy, not stressing its durability. That freedom is the final pillar of an improved user experience and real longevity.
So when you stack up these four advantages, minimum capacity loss, near zero replacement risk, slower depreciation, and just total charging freedom, it becomes profoundly clear that Tesla's engineering strategy here was about far more than just saving a few bucks on materials.
Yeah, the sources really confirmed this was a targeted choice. The goal was not maximum peak performance. It doesn't offer the highest acceleration or the ultimate maximum range. Those specs still belong to the more volatile NCM chemistry in the performance models.
The goal, then, was defined as minimum aging and maximum life.
Exactly. This approach is specifically engineered for the vast majority of drivers, the people who value reliability and longevity over getting from 0 to 60 a tenth of a second faster.
So people using the car for daily commuting, people who charge frequently at home.
And most importantly, owners who are looking at their vehicle as a purchase that is going to last a decade or more. It is the closest technological iteration we currently have to the non-aging battery concept for everyday consumer devices.
It sacrifices a marginal amount of that initial peak performance for an exponential gain in predictable long-term durability.
You are buying a car that is specifically engineered to be a decade-long purchase. It's designed to resist the predictable mechanical and chemical decay that we've come to accept as standard for nearly every other battery-powered device we own. It's an explicit move away from the expectation of planned obsolescence and toward engineered longevity. #outro.
So let's wrap up this deep dive with the core takeaways. We started with this universal anxiety of fast-dying batteries, and we discovered that the cure really lies in a fundamental shift in the chemistry.
We established that standard NCM batteries are these high-energy but fragile sponges that just tear and clog themselves up over 1,000 to 1,500 cycles. But LFP batteries, because of that incredibly strong phosphate bond, are rigid, non-moving steel cages that maintain their integrity through 3,000 to 6,000 cycles.
That structural stability just dramatically slows the whole aging process.
It really does.
And this structural difference entirely reverses the golden rule of battery care. For LFP owners, the advice isn't to avoid 100% charging, but to regularly charge to 100%. That step is a necessary calibration for the battery management system.
That wide, shallow swimming pool.
Exactly. To keep its range estimates accurate, which ensures reliability, not harming the battery's durability.
And ultimately, LFP makes the vehicle a superior long-term financial asset. It virtually eliminates major capacity loss, and it defers that catastrophic future risk of battery replacement far beyond the typical ownership period. It's a design strategy that openly prioritizes generational longevity over flashy, short-term performance gains.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We have been conditioned, for decades now, to just accept that our devices, from our phones to our cars, they must age and fail predictably because of the internal limitations of their power source.
But what if that's no longer true? If we can now manufacture a core technological component like the LFP battery that is specifically designed not to fail mechanically or chemically for 2 to 4 times longer than its predecessor, how does this change our entire definition of a product's lifespan?
That's a huge question.
If the single most expensive and vulnerable component is now engineered for decades-long endurance, does this signal the beginning of a larger technological shift toward true generational longevity? Should we, as consumers, start demanding this same low-degradation philosophy in every power tool we buy, every home energy system, every personal electronic device we purchase?
It really makes you wonder what other technologies are out there right now, sacrificing profound durability just for that short-term, headline-grabbing peak performance boost. We hope this deep dive gave you a completely new perspective on battery anxiety and perhaps the ultimate definition of what well-built really means in the modern era. We'll see you next time.